You see here, kid? You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?
Switching command to internal.
From the Collaborative Studios, Open the Eye, where metaphysical, paranormal, and the unexplained meet. Open the Eye with Tanya Tyler.
I am fascinated by near-death experiences. To have the choice at that moment in time to stay or go. The knowledge that comes with many of the near-death experiences. So what happens? Where do we go? Why do we get to come back? And we've talked about near-death experiences on the show before, but I always think every experience is completely different. My guest tonight has a complete different experience. Plus, he has other information that we're going to dig into and find out his opinion. Because remember, these are just opinions. We're all having our own experience. So each and every one of you will hear something different tonight because it will be your experience that you're hearing, which is fascinating. I want to welcome Russell von Ohlhausen, Conscious Catalyzer, Astrological Researcher. What does that really mean when you say that? What does that mean?
Well, astrology is kind of assumed to be horoscopic astrology, and that's just focusing on the individual and what's happening in your life. But what I look at is how could it be happening in your life? The metaphysics and the actual physics that make all of this work, the correspondence between the heavens and the human, the biology that's also involved. So that's what I am about. I look at all aspects down to the quantum level.
So you're always researching.
I'm a super Sagittarius ascendant, so that's like I'm always researching. My mind kicks on and I'm channeling Hebrew in the middle of the night, So it's like I want to explore consciousness and I want to bring it back here and catalyze others with what we know, what we find.
So is that the consciousness catalyzer?
Consciousness catalyzer. Yeah.
How do you look at consciousness in this world?
Consciousness is one expanded knowing and seeing of the universe. It is the cosmic reflection, and when you learn to tap into it, and you see yourself as everything around you, which is what all the teachings, the great religious teachings, are about. When you expand yourself into that, you realize that everything is a part of you. Like all the ancients are telling you the same thing, And it's like, whoa, that leaf is me. That sunlight is me. Everything around me is connected to whatever this meat suit is walking around, carrying inside of the energy, the prana, the chi. That's really what we are. We're this breath. So yeah, that's how I feel consciousness is. Consciousness is inside of every breath, every thought, and you can tap into it. That's what's happening right now, an awakening of the one mind. That's why we're here talking. We're able to transcend the life-death barrier because consciousness knows how to do that. So our death is only, like they say in the Matrix, it's only in the mind, really.
Tell me, when you're looking at this world right now, and it's so chaotic, beautiful, loving, sporadic. How do you look at consciousness and keep it in a clear form in your mind? Because it's easy to get wrapped up in that river.
Yeah, so this is where I try to take, I step outside of the human experience and I try to look at it a little higher. And there's some philosophers that you may know that are, like Krishnamurti. You may have heard of him. Krishnamurti is a Vedic philosopher. He had a school that wrapped around the world, and taught a different level of teaching between Buddhism, between Hinduism. It was a Vedic teaching. But he paired up in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s with a physicist named David Bohm. And he explains consciousness through the quantum reality. And when I can step from the spiritual reality into the scientific reality, that balances my mind. Well, everything is in place Everything around you is in perfect place. It's you have to learn to tap into that we are part of an implicate-explicate order of consciousness that is evolving and dissolving at the same time. We're like in the meat grinder, right? And we go through more difficult pinch points in this meat grinder. We're going through one now. Reality is shifting in a major way. Consciousness has got to wake up from an ancient past, in a sense, and as it does so, it's squeezing all the negative consciousness out, and it's taking a lot of human energy and a lot of dark energy with it. But it's going through a complex process of consciousness to wake up into a more defined state, so that we can perceive each other more the way we once did. Where humanity is actually passing through a period of time called the Kali Yuga, which is a dark period of consciousness. So we don't understand the life-death cycle the way we once did in a higher state of enlightenment, if you believe in Atlantis or Lemurian theories. So these were places where death was consciously transcended, and we've lost that ability for a while, and now we're waking up to that ability again.
I like that waking up to that. Let's talk about something, and I want to just hear your opinion. This is just opened, and you didn't know this when you came in to record with me. You didn't know this. What do you think happened with the attempt assassination? Do you believe that we shifted a reality? Do you believe that we jumped into a different dimension? What are your just thoughts?
Well, right off the bat, if you look at it scientifically, we all chose a path that day. And some people chose if you look at parallel reality theory, some people chose a path where he didn't make it. There's consciousness that's going down that path, and some are a path that he did, the way we're experiencing it now. There was a pivotal point, a nexus point, if you look at it in history. And the reason I'm saying this is because, oddly enough, and you didn't know I was going to talk about this either. 2 hours before he was shot, I'm sitting on the porch having a conversation with a fellow. He's getting downloads about things that he had been tapped into a few months ago, that there was an event coming up where he would be shot, Trump would be shot in the right ear, and you would see bandages on the right ear later. There would be, he kept saying there's images before, there's images after, there's images before, and these images are going to be a pivotal point. And he was just tapping into this consciousness. And we had a conversation about this. And then I got home, and then he gets shot, and you see the before pictures. And then last night they showed the first time on stage him wearing the bandage on the ear. Yeah. So I feel like what some people are tapped into, and I've also listened to remote viewers, so a lot of people were tapped into events around this particular date. It's like, whoa, okay, this is perfectly in alignment that many people, so we're going through a cycle actually today as well. Mars, Uranus on Algol, which is the death. It is about death. It is even in Asian astrology, that particular star is about death of many, and it's called the beheading or the ghoul star, Algol, in the sky. So everyone knows that, and so something major happened. Like it's like we took a death breath of some type. There was a bit of relief for many, and a lot of upset for others in this process. So you're watching this breath for a moment, and I think you're going to see repercussions from this down the road, because the ripple effect is going to be moving forward through time, and it's like a ripple arrow, like a bullet going through consciousness. It's waking people up to something that the reality is getting real.
Yes, exactly, and that's what I have heard. It's interesting. In October, I said that this was going to happen.
Yeah. Oh,
and
wow.
My mother-in-law said, she texted me right away, and she said, "Wow, you called it in October."
Yes.
Which was odd, and so I saw it happening. But I have heard remote viewers' opinions on this as well, and the same thing. So it's always intriguing to hear other opinions. I do like how you say that we split, because I've heard that.
I have someone sent me the very next day after this happened that they had watched this back in April during the eclipse, a Christian mystic, had recorded a section, and he described this exactly. And they have it on YouTube. Then it was released back in April, so you can double check. This is that he said this, that he was shown visions that this would happen. He would be shot in the right ear, and then and it's like, wow. So that all these little signs and omens, these are confirmations we're in a right path. If you've got messages coming in from before this ripple in time, and you're picking up and you're listening to what people are saying, even if it's crazy sounding or whatever, and then whoa, it's like those are signs that you are experiencing the awakening consciousness. It's like, whoa, there's a reflection there that there's no way they could have had, and it's your experience. That's the thing. These are messages that you've had to have experienced going into the ripple of time and then coming out the other side.
Because everybody's having a different experience, because we're all different individuals.
Right. Everyone's having a different experience, but messages are always coming to you from the conscious field. And then so when you're able to pick up, or like remote viewers are talking about these events that are going to be shocked into the body. Like now, if you are in a little bit of a conspiracy theory and you understand what's going on with the vaccines and whatnot, there's some people are saying, hey, they know how to manipulate that now. They can use this the Starlink technology to activate you. But it's gone beyond that. They can take anyone in biological form and shock your vagus nerve now. They know how to use frequency to achieve a DMT release effect into your brain. And so the people are talking about that they may actually do this sometime soon, where they release a beam of energy and people who've never experienced any kind of psychedelic experience, and suddenly they get a shot of DMT to the brain. They know how to do this now. You're going to believe in Jesus. You're going to believe in God or the great Satan or whatever they tell you to.
DMT is just kind of opens up the serotonin. Right?
Yeah.
DMT is like happiness.
It gives you a happiness dump, and that's what achieves the psychedelic effect. Even if you don't take it, and get it activated from a plant material, you have it in your body. So it's like it is part of the DMT is released at death. So they're putting you in a state between life and death, and you're having this. Then they can augment your existing reality now to have you experience wherever you are a different kind of field and put you into a state that they want, essentially. There's people that understand how to use consciousness and to use the biological form to move things in a higher direction for themselves. You have to be aware of that, and you have to put a protective energy around your body. You have to, one of the things we're talking about, how do we stop some of that if there's energy that can manipulate energy? Well, learn about nature. Get some shungite, put it on your body, wear some stones, go out and connect with the good reality that's around you. Get out of the cities, that kind of thing.
I have shungite all the time in here because it's also EMF.
Right,
protector.
exactly.
So, and shungite, they say, is going to be like one of the biggest things in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so I would say get a pendant or whatever and wear it on your skin. That's what we're saying is like now they can get closer to your biological form. So protect it, ground it out with some nature itself.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I like that. Let's talk a little bit about death because you mentioned it, and I want to go into near-death experience. And you have had one that's pretty huge, and I want to talk about that. Yeah. So tell me, how long ago did it happen, and where were you?
Well, this was back in 2001, and it was probably on March the 18th. It was just a few days or so before the spring equinox of 2001. And a little context, the year before this happened, I had been to Tibet. I had lived there briefly and had wonderful Himalayan awakening experiences, connecting to higher consciousness. And that was, I feel like I had been through a rebirth process the year before, in a sense. But I still had the travel bug. And a friend of mine, when I got back to Texas, we decided we were going to park the car at the border of Mexico and chicken truck it all the way down to Argentina.
Oh, fun.
So
chicken truck it.
Yeah,
we were like, heard that one.
Well,
before.
we were like, how are we going to make it? There's some buses, but how do we get through some of these places? We had really no idea. This was, the .com bubble had burst. But, so I was living on light and had a great experience. And I had not traveled in Mexico before, even though I had traveled in Asia. So I had my credit cards ready to go. And Anyway, we got down there. We found out we had no money. That was the first thing I found out. We stopped and parked at the border. We made it down to the little village of Papantla in Veracruz, where we had planned a stop. So my uncle, who was actually kind of well known in these parts, his name was Ted Norris. He passed away, Dr. Ted Norris. He passed away a couple of years ago. So he had invited me down to this festival, which was taking place in the jungle, and it was called the Festival of the Cumbre Tajín. They still do it every year down there, and this was an amazing festival that it was like the Cirque du Soleil in the jungle. The governor put it on. It was a tribal revival. There were mixing of crowds and people, and they had invited people from all over the world. So the healers from Europe, from Asia, from everybody had met in this village for 2 weeks, and I got invited to go there.
I bet the energy that leveled there for 2 weeks was out of control.
It was intense based on the planets as well. So I've looked into this death experience, and I don't have the chart memorized what was going on for me at the time, but it was a transitional point. But it was also, like I said, it was the festival was happening. So it was a healing festival. And unfortunately, there was some governmental upheaval. So this was the Zapatistas were involved at the time. And a week before we got down there, I think it's like 20 people had died. So they were very anxious because it was a national festival and a lot of eyes are on this thing. So they were quick to remove anything out of the field that they didn't want. So anyway, I got to. Can you pause?
Yeah. You're good. You keep it. It's good. I like how this festival was so like just with healers and everything like that. I mean, what a beautiful festival to be part of, and in the time frame as well.
Yeah, so it was interesting because we had to camp in the jungle, and there were the healers' side. We had a camp area just for them, and different procedures for those who came to facilitate. And then there were about 5,000 or people had come, and they'd camping in the other section. And then there were also the villagers that were there. They had employed all the local Mayans who were very traditional around in this jungle area. So it was Papantla's in the mountains, this jungle, and so this was at the Pyramid of the Niches at the time, and this is a pyramid complex. So I had been surrounded by all of these images of Quetzalcoatl and all the dragon gods and all the reptilian energies. So this had been my field while I had been down there the week before. And I guess I will tell you that I had went through a little ego trip at the time. And a lot of my friends would call me the Emperor. And I wore this little emperor crown around for years, and they just loved to call me that. So,
I like how you said the ego.
Yes, the ego was having fun down on Earth
Sometimes
at the time.
Yeah.
So yes, I had worn it to New Orleans, and it stood out, and so everyone said, "Just keep wearing it," at Mardi Gras. And anyways, so I had worn it for a while, and I had worn it down while I was there, and so all the people were calling me the little emperor, essentially. So I kind of stood out, among everyone else. It was dynamic personalities that were down there, some great people.
And we're talking right now to Russell von Ohlhausen, who is a consciousness catalyzer.
Yeah, catalyzer. Trying to catalyze.
And astrological researcher. He is here sharing at this moment some of his experiences, his thoughts, his opinions, and we're talking about near-death experience that he had.
Right. So giving you some context to what was actually happening at this festival, it was an amazing event. And I was surrounded by all these energies and all these peoples and all these traditions. And, it was so controversial because the government, it was on edge. It was like a nodal point, like something was about to happen. There were very famous people that were there. This process began, my death process, I guess. I had gone to visit with some of these famous people, and I was sitting at a table. The governor had come in and built these little jalapas that were brand new with concrete pads and everything, and the people were coming to join at our table.
So
Jalapa is like a little thatched roof hut, and then they had concrete poured around, and so they were all brand new from the government. And we were getting more and more crowded. It was like 20 people, 30 people were coming in, and some people were coming to sit at our table. And I went to sit down, and my chair had fallen away into the fresh soil. Didn't hear it. And I came down on my spine. Ooh. I hit the base of my spine. I was shocked. I didn't drink. I didn't have anything to drink at the. I had just, people were coming, and so I was surrounded by healers and doctors, medical doctors from the United States, were standing all around me. They were witnessing what was happening. So I stood up, and a lot of the crowd was saying, "Hey, Baracho, he's drunk," and they said, "No, he hasn't anything to drink." After a moment or so, I sat down, and everyone was, back to their beers, and I began to slump over the table. And my uncle was watching this happen. My motor abilities just stopped. My hands stopped, and I slumped over the table. My uncle had the wherewithal to grab a stopwatch, and he was counting what was going on from when I stopped breathing. So,
wow, you actually physically stopped breathing.
Oh, yeah.
And as this is happening, do you remember like, oh my gosh, I'm going to fall forward? Or do you remember anything like that? Or it's all dark?
The last thing I do recall was my head was going for the table, and I couldn't stop it. My
the motor skills were not in your control.
Well, yeah. What had happened is the energy went up my spine, and it acted like a reverse head concussion, but it went up the spinal cord. And as it did, it killed the spinal fluid in each of the vertebrae over a 2-minute period. And they witnessed this, because of and so it was a slow motion dying. The whole nervous system just shut down. So my uncle put me into the infield coma test. They rushed some medical equipment over to me, but nothing was working. And from my point of view, all I saw was my reality phasing out as my head went to go hit the table.
And that was it. That's all that you saw.
That was all that I saw for that moment. And then I could feel a little bit as they put me into the grass. They laid me out into this field. And then my reality shifted into black with stars. I could see these sprinkle stars, and they began to come into a ball of light. And then
it was a big ball of light.
A ball of light, yeah, but it was surrounded by a kind of void of darkness. But then it expanded into all of the energies and the entities that I had seen while I had been around these pyramids. So I started seeing the local energies like Quetzalcoatl in form. And I was like, wow, okay, this is an interesting reality. And trust me, at this point, I had never done psychedelics. So it's like I had no idea what was going on.
Hadn't had any alcohol, nothing in your system.
And I was like, whoa, okay, this is interesting. And I realized I couldn't move. I couldn't feel any body at the time. I just felt like I was part of this void and this connected light, having this experience of some sparkly forms. And they drifted all around me, and they took on different shape. And then it went into a fuzzier area, and I began to be asked questions. Like something was like, how do you feel about leaving?
Oh, so you did get those questions.
Oh, yeah. I just got these questions. So it was like, how do you feel about leaving? And I felt okay with it at the moment. I felt I could go either way. But something told me, there was a side of me that said, you have more work to do, and this is only a starting point. And I felt like I was on the precipice, not only of life and death, but I was on the precipice. Do you choose life, or do you choose to go on and have this other experience? And there was a part of my soul that stepped back and said, no, you're not done yet.
Yeah. So
literally, I had that thought.
Because I want to go back to that, but what I want to talk about real quick is as you are leaving, like you slump over, they pull you into the grass, you remember a little bit of the grass.
Yes.
Right? Do you remember hearing them talk and it's fading away? Do you remember seeing your body? Because I've heard other near-death experiences have seen the body laying there and people working on it. Now you're floating away from it. Did any of those things happen?
Not at that time. No, it did. I immediately, my consciousness went into the void. It just snapped over to the other side. Once there's no recollection of me pulling away. Now, I've connected with death other ways since then.
Yes.
I've had that transcendent I've been able to understand death more through other processes once I went through this one.
We are talking to Russell von Ohlhausen. He is a astrological researcher, consciousness catalyzer. He is talking about his near-death experience that had happened. We're going to take a little break. You can always stream us every Monday night at 10 p.m. on kwvh.org. You can also call into the studio at 512-722-3266 and email me at opentheye, like your eyeball, 13@gmail.com. I'll take Russell. When we come back, we're going to talk about where you went. Obviously, we know what you chose because you're here talking to us, but I want to know a little bit about what those experiences were and if you have had any heightened experiences consciously. We'll be right back. Talking to Russell von Ohlhausen, who is an astrological researcher, conscious catalyzer. We're talking about your near-death experience.
Yeah, so when I had gone into an area where there was a concrete platform, and I hit my spine, came up, and went through basically a head concussion in reverse, and had collapsed over onto the table. And from my point of view, that was the last thing I saw. I don't remember too many voices at that. So I guess maybe the senses went out at different times. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of the sensation of being laid in the grass. And that's when the experiences began to happen with the light around me, feeling like it was being manipulated by other forces that were in nature. It was like I was shown maybe what the local, natives had been shown for years, that there's this forces, and they just put them in images that we could understand as reptiles and such. It was like I was shown these. It was like a connected light language in a sense. It wasn't scary at all.
No.
So that's why I felt like, there's information I could go learn there, but does that require me to relieve the rest of my physical form? And it's like that's part of the deal. So no, I came back.
Yeah. And you said that you had like a choice. It like started asking you some questions. Do you know who or what form was asking you these questions, or was it a collective consciousness asking that just a knowing?
It honestly, I hate to say this, but it felt like my higher self directly. It was almost as if it were my own voice asking me from a different place on this timeline. It's like, this is your choice point, and that's what it felt like from myself from a future or an eternity to it's like this is an important place for you to understand this process. Where do you want to take it from here?
I like it. Yeah. Thank you. So you chose yes. Was there anything else that you got that information while you were out into the ethers, I guess?
Well, I felt like it was an impulse download. It's like you get the data packet, but your CPU isn't quite up to speed to process it all. But that began a series of unpacking all that because my spinal cord had to heal over time. So it was a long process after that.
Yeah.
But
how long were you out for?
Well, that was interesting. From my point of view, it only felt like 2 or 3 minutes. But my uncle, who had the forethought to coma test me in the field, constantly checking the heart, I was out for 26 minutes.
Holy moly!
Yes,
that's a long time.
Before I took my first breath. So what happened was all of these healers had heard about what was going on. So they rushed over some local shaman. They rushed over some people with crystals. And what brought me back was the feeling of these sparkles that I had seen began to sting my face. And I began to feel my pinch points in my hand, and different things began to awaken in my nervous system again. So they had gotten the local chief, and they were doing a dance, and they had told the community around me, the little Mayan people, about or 400 of them had heard. So they stopped what they were doing because they thought they had flown the federales in a helicopter. And the first things I heard were them arguing with my uncle about putting me in the body bag.
Wow.
Yes. So they were arguing. He said, no, he's staying here. And they're like, no, we've already had 20 deaths a week ago. Get his carcass out of here. So that's what was happening because it had been over 20 minutes.
Wow.
You know? So from my experience, it didn't feel like that. Time had been compressed, you know. So that was an interesting difference. So what they had told the local people that as I was having an instant Kundalini experience, which is represented by the spine. So they were telling the locals, and they didn't understand the word Kundalini, but some of the other teachers were, so they began to say Kundalini, and I guess somehow they're chanting, and the doctor from the tribe had come down, and they were doing a dance in front of me, and they were spewing grain alcohol, which is a tradition to awaken the dead.
Oh wow!
So they were spewing this stuff into my face, and it was stinging, and that's the first sensations that I began to feel, and then I could hear the crowd let a gasp because my heart was back online. So I laid there for I don't know how much longer, but I couldn't move. Yeah. I was still, my nervous system was like rebooting, I suppose.
Yeah, for sure.
I was breathing my heart, so I was no longer brain dead or whatever was going on, and but I couldn't move my hands and digits, but I could hear clearly what was going on for several minutes.
Could you speak?
I couldn't speak for a moment. So they kept suddenly I got this sense of joy. Like, I came over me. I was just laying there. I was like, I can't say anything. I can't do anything. I don't feel anything quite yet. And I just started smiling. And it's like, he's smiling.
Wow.
So I could hear them saying that, right? But
I can't believe that you heard the body bag.
Oh, yeah.
That's
yeah,
crazy.
They were arguing.
That would be a wild thing to come back. You're like, whoa, what? Wait, what?
Well, so the sound began to come back on, I guess, as soon as I started breathing. I don't know. It was like, but I couldn't move my hands or anything. So,
wow.
But then the subtle sensations came back to me. I was like, but then it didn't matter. I felt happy. So I'm laying there, and they were asking me my name. They were like, who are you? Tell us your name. Tell us your name. And I was like, what do I say? I don't know. I couldn't say anything yet. I was waiting to answer. And I just thought, I'll say El Emperador. So I said El Emperador, and everybody just started laughing because the whole crowd had seen me for a week and a half wearing this crown, and they knew I was the emperor. So suddenly I busted out laughing, and all these thousands of people are standing around. So that was my part of my death experience. Now, can I finish telling the rest of the story? So what happened was. They were afraid I was going to go into a coma if I went to sleep.
Okay.
So they took me out onto this giant stage. It's like a stage that you would see at Cirque du Soleil. There were people swinging from all kinds of things, and it was so lit up, and they were bringing tribes in. This was being put on by the governor of Veracruz, the state of Veracruz. And so they did not let me go to sleep, and the tribal leaders, one of them who had been the one who was spewing the alcohol, they got me back up on the stage, and they kept me up dancing with them until 5 a.m.
No.
I was having to wear these blankets, and they were attending me, and I was doing the wrong steps, but they were trying to keep my motor system. So I was dancing with these Aboriginal tribes people on this stage for like hours.
This is wild because the spine kind of goes to sleep. I mean, it's that fluid stops, and then them chanting around you and singing and dancing and spewing, the grain alcohol on you awakes you. And then you finally come back in, you kind of go, okay, yeah, now I can talk. And now they're having you up within an hour to 2 hours, right? Dancing.
Yeah.
I mean, and which makes sense because they don't want you to go to sleep.
Yeah, they kept me up from like 7 p.m. till 5 a.m. dancing. So that was, finally they let me go to sleep. And this was in the tent in the jungle, I'll remind you. So when I woke up the next day around 2 in the afternoon, all the blood. I have this other condition. I have light nasal linings of my bloodline. I'm a free bleeder.
Okay.
So, well, the compression had finished. It had built up in my head, and all this blood had released while I was inside the tent, passed out, cold, asleep. And this was during the day. So I woke up at 2:00 in this jungle, and this blood had strewn all over my face. My hair was sticking out, and and it looked like I had been shot in the face. So I come out of the tent, and now like I'm rushing over again.
Oh no!
Because the blood was everywhere.
They're thinking for themselves. No more. We're not inviting anymore. It's not a tribesman.
Gringos are crazy.
Okay, so you've got all this blood all over your face, and they're coming over now.
So
what
they
do
got
do?
me cleaned up, and so they started another process. That everybody had heard about what had happened. So that was some of my first introduction to some of these quantum healers. These iridologists came in and took care of me. All these healing people came around and initiated me at this point. Right.
Wow.
So. So that was interesting. Now, the next day, we were not allowed to get into the very high-priced festival, but the governor of the state of Veracruz had heard about what happened. So he got 2 tickets for me, for my chicken Chuck and brother that was going down there. And we got in and we got front row seats, and we were sitting up with famous people. I mean, I was like two rows over from the governor. I was like, thank you. It was an amazing thing. And this went on as the solstice passed. We got to witness this, like at 1 a.m. We watched the exact moment of solstice. They were doing these rituals at the pyramids, the way they had done them for thousands of years,
Yeah.
So that was my rebirth reward, doing that. But it was,
What an amazing experience. I mean, not do you just die, but on top of that, you have all these healers around you, and you're experiencing the solstice with pyramids. I mean, that's just, that kind of blows my mind.
We got back to Austin, and then my system had just shut down, and it took me probably 3 months to get my cerebral fluid back up and going. I was sort of just lethargic.
Let's talk about some of the downloads that you probably have had after that. Any heightened awareness?
No, definitely. It was a slow progression of different senses that I'm able to tap into, but also based on working with my mind. So the deeper I went into metaphysics, just like it says, the more that you know about what's happening through these metaphysical processes, whether they're biblical, whether they're hermetic, whether they're studying Kabbalah, whether these unlock consciousness doorways. So if you have the seeds of this already embedded in you and planted in you, which we all do, but you have to kind of be activated, and that's a shocker. A death experience will activate you till you're seeing differently. And you take that combined with knowledge, you can see more and more. You can tap into the ancient eye. So that's been my journey, and that was just a launching point for understanding more about the death process. Being at a place where you have the ability to let go of life and you choose to come back to that. Your mind is choosing also what it desires, and mine is knowledge of these barriers, these boundaries of life and death. And I let it, take me into the scariest places. So that was a fun one, in my opinion, having all that happen in the jungle. But I've been to scarier death places since then by working with ancient medicines and working with jungle medicines, So ayahuasca, the death vine, if anyone you've worked with that puts you at that life and death state, and it's chaotic. So you can understand what the Aboriginals understand about our reality, and how it cuts off. It's a cutting off point where you choose a different path.
What is that experience? I mean, do you go to your death and then come back with ayahuasca?
Many times. Yeah, so I've done this work before with psilocybin. That was my first understanding of that. It was many years ago, and I was put at that doorway, and it wasn't a choice. It was that at that point it was a very difficult process of unwinding my consciousness. It was quite a different chaotic experience. But since then, I understood. It taught me things about life and death. That level of psychedelic experience. So by the time I got to ayahuasca, which was in 2018, I was sort of prepared for what I was about to experience, but not entirely. And I felt like I was getting signs and omens before we went into my partner, Shannon, and I both did these 3 nights of ayahuasca.
3 nights.
3 nights.
Wow. Because how long does ayahuasca last?
It can last 8-10 hours,
Okay.
and I'm trying to remember exactly. It's one of those things I have blocked out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be that. And I had a sensitivity to it right away. It was not fun for me. The first one, it was very, very intense and very, very scary. And I just remember it seemed like an eternity with every vibration became negative. Anything like a cricket, it felt like it hurt me, And then everything in the field, the doors shutting, it almost felt like I was feeling levels of a demonic field of darkness, and maybe that's what some people describe at that level of death. When it slowed down, I felt like, whoa, dude, I don't know if I want to go any deeper than this. Into the state. If it just either drop me through or let me loose, that's what. But being stuck there for quite a while, that's what that felt like. And then, but the next time, I actually.
Do you when you get stuck there, when you're going through that negative, dark place, how long?
Well, it doesn't. See, that's where the time thing comes in. It just doesn't. You don't feel time. Time feels so expanded. You're like into crevices of micro time in your consciousness. You're sensing things at such a deep level. Time. You're like, this is what, almost like I'm imagining myself right now describing this this is what it feels like to particles slow down. It's painful when they're being dissolved, and I felt like my part of consciousness is awakening. I don't want to be at that level right now. I need to come back to the human level of understanding and existence. I feel like I'm fighting levels of reality. That's what it felt
interesting.
like. Yeah.
And then did that last the whole entire first time you ever did it? Or did you shift into like you saw something and the death piece came to you?
I felt like I was floating on these levels of life and death for what felt like eternities, and there was that one that felt very digitized, and there was one that felt like it was wanting to take me apart just wanted to slice you apart like a spider. I mean, it felt very dark and uncaring, and then there's another part that feels like it's working with you, like this is part of your expanding consciousness knowledge. And so you're always feeling a stress between levels of consciousness, really what it really boils down to. It became so uncomfortable. I mean, for my physical reality, I had to leave the space. I snuck out of the space we were all doing ayahuasca on the second night because it felt like everyone was going through this dark process. And I was taking on too much of their energy. I could feel that, wait, this is not how I usually think. I've got to get out of their field. Yeah. And then they came and brought me back. And then the next night I was a little more prepared. So I snuck my headset in. And when the things got so crazy with sound, I actually had the wherewithal to play with this. So I put my headset on. So I wasn't, at least I was contained to what my own consciousness was experiencing, and I put on a binaural, and then my reality is dropping out, and so it's like, wow, okay, this, no matter what I'm doing, it doesn't. I would not repeat these experiences. I probably won't ever do ayahuasca again because of this.
Okay.
But one of the other things that happened, and I don't talk about this very much, but
thank you for sharing.
Yes, I experienced at some point along the line, I experienced being trapped inside a digital reality.
Ooh.
Like I felt like I was inside one of these old video games from the 80s.
Like the Sega.
Yeah, and cute, very cubicle. But my soul was trapped in a glitch in the matrix. Somehow the death experience had thrown me offline. And that felt like an eternity in itself, being trapped inside. And I was like, maybe AI is trying to tell us something. There is this, portal to digital death, and consciousness can experience that too. I don't know what that was about, but it was still uncomfortable being trapped in something that did not feel like it was like I was in a box. It was a box of boxes. And so that was very, very scary as well. And like I said, I felt like this was almost like a digital death. It felt like on a very pixelated level of a process.
On a positive note, what good did come out of your ayahuasca trip?
I released a lot of these concepts about dancing with these dark principles. It's like, okay, I don't need to do that dance with death again. I don't need to keep treating that as a novelty. I felt like I ended something, like that I can understand it now from a mental perspective, from an intellectual perspective. I can read the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and I understand it a little better about these different levels of consciousness and pathing through death and life. It's like I felt like they were showing me what they experienced when they wrote these doctrines or these books. Even the Egyptian books of the dead. There's this passing, how consciousness passes through levels of reality. So I felt like I got to understand that experience, even to the level of it may not even be, all analog around here. It may be somewhat digitized.
AI now just coming into our reality, or are we just now coming into the awareness?
I think what you just said is true. The latter, So I think that Elon Musk describes it that it's one in how many billion chances that this is base reality. At some level, it's some process of a simulation. And inside of the Vedic teachings, they discuss the observer and the observed. Like we're inside a video game. When your consciousness projects outward, that's really the limit it has to create for you.
What are your thoughts on Mandela effect?
I believe this is a sign. This is a truth that these things can be thrown back in ripples of time. I don't see anything. Well, my understanding of the Mandela effect is, when they find certain items, this is part of this, is they can be thrown back. Suddenly you find a hammer inside next to a T-Rex, fossil. You've got something there. What's happening there? Yeah, and you keep finding this over and over again. You're finding,
or things are changing.
Things are changing. Modern car parts are frozen in a rock in Nebraska. They break it open. How did that happen? And there's like it's not just once or twice, it's so many times that this Mandela effect may as we get to certain points in time, the future and the past collide, and they collide. I think of this show Loki.
Loki.
Loki is dealing with this, where they're finding that it says this is not a novel idea. It's in the field that this is a possibility that things from the future get thrown in the past and preserved, and we find them we're in the present. So of course, if you think of time that way, it's definitely possible and it is probable.
Because we are here, and so what happens is when things change. It's little simple things now, but you're seeing like Richard Simmons, he just passed not too long ago. I swore that he passed like 5 years ago.
Oh, yes, that was well, yeah.
My husband came out and said, "Oh, did you know Richard Simmons passed?" And I was like, whoa, this is really weird. And then I told him a little story about Richard Simmons and my uncle, because they knew each other in L.A. And so I told him that story. And as I'm telling him the story, I thought, well, that's really weird, because I thought I told him this story when he died before, but did he just die? And did I forget? And so then I go online and I'm researching Richard Simmons dying, and people are like, no, he died 5, 6, 7 years ago, or during COVID or something. And so I was like, whoa, I did think this. Yeah. So, things like that always kind of shift. That's because we're here, we're living in this time, right. Things are shifting.
That's the same mental effect you see with physical objects being thrown into the physical past. It's the mental energies being compressed from alternative realities or into a nodal point in the present.
Right. So, did we jump into another reality?
Yeah. That you're going to experience you're going to experience that other reality, a little bit of it, like a residual memory from the other realities still crossing over. Of course that. And that happens. Many of those realities don't make it and they die. So you experience the death of, of those realities breaking off.
Right. And just like they're now finding all these great, these crazy prehistoric animals that I've never seen this before, brand new. Well, are they creating them? I don't know. Or are they in another reality?
Right.
And we're just now seeing them because we've shifted into different realities.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a whole nother show about reality,
Right.
so I don't even want to go there. But I wanted to know your thought process about the Mandela effect, because there's so many people now that are having it or being aware of it.
Yeah, it's a ripple, and it's it's a fracturing of other realities. And if you watch shows, like I said, the Loki series, it explains some of what I just described. So I was having visions of this a few years ago, how this Mandela effects would work with reality, and I wrote some literature about it. And then so when I watch this series, I'm like, they are tapping into the consciousness that I tapped into when I wrote about it a few years ago, because it explains how that all works together, how some realities are literally cut off or lost, and you experience the death of all, like one of the psychedelic experiences I had, I felt like like you remember that in the movie Star Wars when they blow up that planet, it's suddenly he experienced the loss of all those souls. Well, I went through an experience. I felt like one of the realities didn't make it, and everyone died at once. Like I felt the loss of millions and millions of souls.
Wow.
And it's like, okay, it took me a while to assimilate that understanding, like through other processes, but that's what happened. In some we experience life and death through others because our consciousness are connected at all levels, and sometimes you feel a resonance with one or another. That's why you have specific past life memories. A lot of people like to connect to what's famous who I'm trying to think of someone Napoleon. Like I have a death. I was Napoleon, and it's okay. And you get how many Napoleons out there having that life, or so that kind of thing.
They're connecting to that.
I was Cleopatra. We all were at some level, but I mean, she's having a more. They're having a different kind of experience, a reflection memory from those past lives.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. That's a good thought process.
And so it's so just on top of that, I have a friend of mine who she works out of Egypt a lot, and we were talking about the little temple, the Elephantine temples down there, and I had some past memories of like I was there at some point. I was there. But I felt more individuated because I have memories of ancient Egypt that were higher, where I felt like I was collected to more individual souls at once. So I felt like not only did we have many past lives in a local area, like in Egypt, like thousands of generations went through, so like you can have the experience from those who were in the period of the Elephantine River, which were only 2,000, around 2,000 years ago, or you can go back and have the experiences of those connected 6,000 years ago or 7,000 years ago. You can have all those experiences, and I felt more connected. It's like I was feeling the truth of the one mind through the Egyptian mindset. Oh. That's why I realized it's so important that it's all one mind. It's all the Eye of Horus or the Eye of Ra. These are symbols to remind us of these awakening processes of a collective death. Yeah. So this is, biblically, you can think of it, we're awakening into eternal life.
Ooh, that's a good one. Right. I never thought about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see this happening. People are talking more religiously these days about the Christed one mind, and it's like no, it's because it's embedded in their understandings that they're getting another level of information out of the teachings now.
Yeah. No, you're so right on that because you are hearing it and you are seeing that, and ancient civilization times are being spoken of as well. I mean, everything is kind of coming up. I mean, we live in an amazing time. Yeah. This is an amazing time to be alive, even though we feel like there's so much chaos and there's so much craziness. This is a beautiful time to be alive. Yes, and now this is the awakening. Oh, Russell, thank you so much. How can people follow along your journey?
theshiftfoundation.org.
Beautiful.
That's where we're doing a collective work there for this part. We have a foundation that is about the shift in consciousness.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Russell, for coming on and sharing all this, just the insight in your near-death experience. I think you were brave to share that, but to go through it is very brave. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Namaste.
Namaste.